Yep, we're live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Not Another Tooling Podcast with myself and my co-host, Mr. Matt Malcolm. Matt, how are you today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. The week and year is wrapping up well. So, yeah, can't complain at all.
Yeah, almost Christmas time. And for some of our audience, it will be chaos time if you're in retail. And for some, if you're in manufacturing or something like that, you're probably like looking forward to a well-earned couple of weeks off, probably. Thanks. Very up and down. I spoke to somebody yesterday who was like finishing today for Christmas. I was like, wow, that is impressive. And some people are like, I hate this time of year. Got Boxing Day sales coming up and things like that. So it's a real mixed bag. So feel for you if you're on call over Christmas and experiencing that stress. Are you all set for Christmas?
I think so, but like with 4 kids, it's like, how set can you be? But then we've also got, so we've got a birthday, so wife birthday and Christmas, one of the boys' birthday and Christmas, and then the other boy's birthday and Christmas. So we've got like all that happening over the next 2 weeks. So yeah. Although actually, I'm taking the day off for Monday. The one boy, we're having like a day out, and I love those days. Take him out of school for the day. You got to fill in the paperwork at school. You got to say what's the significant reason or something like that is why you can't take him out of school. And I just wrote birthday.
Wow, nice, very cool. Yeah, same in my household too. It's my birthday just after Christmas, which is the worst time to have a Christmas. Worst time to have a Christmas, worst time to have a birthday. Nobody cares, but it's fine. Very lucky being taken away this year, so that'll be fun. And it's my daughter's birthday next week as well. So
nice,
all good. Anyway, we should probably talk about some tooling stuff. On our personal life, which is today we are talking about getting clear on your tools outcomes for 2025, because this is typically the time of year where people start to think about their ambitions for next year or New Year's resolutions or whatever you're going to call them, and I think it's sometimes you get this at a kind of a company level, right? What we're going to do this year, and all that sort of thing. But from a tooling perspective, it'd be good to think about what you might want to achieve next year, because you don't often get these times unless you're under pressure to deliver something, or you're putting in a new tool or whatever, where you get a chance to really think, hang on a minute, what could we do next year? And I think there's a couple of things. I mean, we're going to go into some stuff that you've used really effectively in a bit for this. But also I think, and this isn't tooling specific, but one thing I've personally found is that having some downtime, which hopefully some people are going to get over Christmas and New Year, your mind just gets a bit clearer about things, and you're out of the hustle and bustle of this went wrong yesterday and this is going crazy and I need to deliver this project or whatever. And your mind just kind of settles down and you get a bit of clarity. So I'd encourage people to not just like sit down and go like, right, I really need to think really hard about this, what we're going to do. Go out for a walk in the countryside or something like that, and just think, right, while I'm out, I'm just going to ruminate a little bit on what we might do, because a clearer mind will help you see clearer what you might want to achieve next year. Anyway, that's my hippie intro, because I'm a big old hippie at heart.
Talking about hippie, how's the van?
It's very cool. Yes. It is awesome. Yeah, for those listeners who are interested, I bought an old VW T25 recently. It's 37 years old. I love converted camper van. It's awesome. So, more of my hippiness, but cool. So Matt, when you have started customers on thinking about their outcomes, whether that's beginning of the year or they've just brought you in and said we need to do something differently on tools, where do you start with this?
Just set it all on fire, man. Screw it. Start over. Nah, well, I guess it's a topic we talked about a good amount of times. But the underlying tone of all of it is like the so what needs to be addressed. That's the starting of the conversation. So some handful of the organisations we're working with now got big aspirations, big activities taking place next year. But like still, like so what? Like what's the purpose of it? So I think that's going to be one of the fundamental things. Is what is the so what to it? And it's the easiest words I can use. But I guess if we were going to wrap it up into more strategic kind of words, it would be things like the vision, the mission, the objectives, etc., which ultimately help address the so what. But that's the starting point typically.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And a reason why it's a really good starting point is it's also a great way to get funding for doing things, right? If you say, oh, do you know what, we could do with better visibility in our Kubernetes environment because it takes us a few minutes longer than it should do, and it's annoying to go look at. People aren't going to give you much money to go do that sort of thing. Not that you always need money, but if you are aligned to strategic goals of the company and you say, hey, I think we can make a real difference to our profitability goals, let's say for 2025, if we did this automation project on this tool that we've already got over here, but we're just going to invest in some more services to help us get the most out of it, for example, chances are that's you're going to get that money versus pet projects type thing.
Yeah, agree, and that wraps up back to the so what massively, doesn't it? It's like you need to be able to represent how the needle is going to be moved. Otherwise, why spend the cash or not spend the cash in the meantime?
Yeah, and it's not always an easy conversation to have, right? A lot of us who've worked in this tool space for years and years, you're always dragged into that technical discussion of, well, storage was on fire last week, so we need to sort out our storage monitoring and blah blah blah. And somebody says, well, what difference does that make to the business? And it's hard to do that. So if you're struggling to make the leap between what you want to do in the tooling space and the business objectives, that's absolutely where Matt can help, where you're welcome to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn. We've been more than happy to have conversations with you about that, but also go and talk to your partners and your vendors in that strategic way. These are the outcomes I'm trying to achieve. What have others done? Maybe go to some dinners with your peers. There's plenty of these around, and ask them what are they doing. How have they done these things? Because there's plenty of people that have done these things that can bring some really good knowledge to bear. I think. So, okay. So you've got your outcomes, and you're like, okay, great. We're gonna improve profitability, or we're going to sell more of these, or we're going to get engines out the door faster this year, or whatever it is. What do you do next, Matt?
So I guess the more mature place, I suppose, is have some sort of hierarchy to what the strategies. So there's some logical order that would make sense. So your top end is very business orientated. Your example, engines out the door or increased revenue or whatever else. And then you start to like break down the layers so they become more and more relevant to the individual teams, departments, ultimately eventually individuals that would support it. Obviously from a tooling space, there'll be a narrow focus on a subset of them, but there's a typical order. I'll just run it through now and I'm going to flash it up on the screen as well. So top level is business related stuff. It's and we'll talk about these in more detail in a second, I suppose, but top levels are the business perspective. Like what is the business trying to achieve? Then below that, to be able to support the vision, that'll be their vision, and there might be just a handful of them, between, I don't know, 1 to 5 maximum. Then we get into what's their overall mission, and this is mission statement territory, where we're understanding this is the vision we're trying to achieve, this is the mission we're going to go on, or missions, in order to achieve that vision. Then below that, we get into more of the DOE kind of territory, where we start to look at the overall goals, and this is where we're looking at the metric side of things. Because ultimately having this stack in its place with no metrics is just wish list territory and everyone's dreaming. So there needs to be some level of interdependency and metrics that support each of the layers. After the goals are established, you then into the objectives and the strategies. This is very much the doing territory. So what we're actually trying to do and what is our plan or approach to be able to do it. And then lastly, at the strategy level would be the individual initiatives. So I won't go top to bottom example, but let's say an initiative could be a asset discovery project. That could be an initiative. Well, that's going to surface X, Y, Z to ultimately increase the customer's vision, which might have been to improve the user experience. Well, we can't improve the user experience because we don't know what assets we've got and we can't monitor them. We can't do X, Y, Z. So there's some sort of logical dependency relationships that build up. But that would be the layer. So vision, mission, goals, objectives, strategies, and initiatives. That's the full brunt activity. Of course, that can be slimmed down. But if you was going to do it in a detailed way, those are the layers you build up in your tooling strategy for next year. I'll just put this on the screen now.
Yeah, great. And I love those. There's something you put in there about overall mission is a really important one, I think. It's so often we're bogged down in the day-to-day, whatever it is, implementing the next feature function or doing an upgrade or whatever it is, and we forget the mission. We forget that we're people driving towards a mission which supports the objectives and outcomes of the business. And this is often where a lot of projects really get stuck, I think. And DJ talked about this on a podcast that we did a few weeks ago, is this kind of culture change and making sure that everybody is aligned to the mission that we're trying to achieve. Otherwise, people will do things the way we've always done them, right? It's just human nature, unless you can really see that you drive to a change. And I love that goals and metrics piece as well. I always talk about this with my clients is, what are you going to move the needle on? And having that and having some way of tracking that. Most tools have some way of tracking those metrics, but worst case, you could just do it with a spreadsheet, make sure that every week or every month or whatever, you go back, relook at those metrics and make sure that you're making it an impact. And tools so often aren't measured on metrics, right? we plugged a gap, away we go, great, now we can see our cloud stuff, blah blah blah. What does that mean? How does that rate, not just at a business level, but at your level as well? What are the metrics that you've done? Right now, everything is instrumented to our gold standard, is it? And it's got, we've driven down MTTR, and there's less. We don't have to hire a new person over there because we've automated those sets of tasks that we set out to do. Really love those.
And just on the sort of topology view of like the structure, like I sort of talk through like the logical levels. If you was in a more mature state, it doesn't need to be overly complicated. A lot of enterprise architecture tools, that is generally the structure they follow, with some nuances here or there depending on the vendors and stuff like that. But ultimately, there is some structure. Now that's in an enterprise architecture tool. That tool and the reason to buy a tool like that isn't in the gift of everybody. Like, why would you? Some of the ITSM and ESM tools are breaching into that space as well. But ultimately, this doesn't need to go in a tool per se. You just need to understand what the structure would look like, because there's different levels of interaction at each levels of that structure. So there's a reason why that structure would exist, but it doesn't have to be in a tool. You could put it maybe not on a PowerPoint because you want to be able to measure metrics, but maybe on a spreadsheet or something like that. There can be a logical structure you can do without having to spend loads on a fancy tool. It's an important thing to mention.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that. And it's interesting looking at things in this way. You often get a totally different kind of view of your tool chain and what's in it and what you really need. And the projects that you thought were important, suddenly you're going, hang on a minute, how does that align to our mission? And how are we going to move the needle on those metrics by doing that project? Actually, what we should be prioritizing is this thing over here. So I think this is a really useful exercise, and it's really good time to do something that we talked about in one of our first ever episodes, I think, where we looked through.
Was that 2 years ago now?
Oh, do you know, probably
It wasn't last year.
is,
I think because we launched and we were going live around December. I'm sure we did our first one around then. So I think it's literally been 2 years.
It
That's mad,
probably is, yeah. So we talked about taking 6 months worth of incident data and just having a look at where the real issues are in your incident management process, right? Most of these tools that we talk about are there to improve that incident management process. And by going and looking at the real data, you can very easily get a picture of the sorts of things that you need to make improvement of. And I say this because so many times people are looking to improve something that went wrong last week, right? It's top of mind. You've had 2 war rooms on this thing, so we really need to fix that issue. Whereas once you start looking at the data, you start going, hang on a minute, 60% of our incidents go to the wrong resolver group first time. Well, that costs us money with the wrong engineers looking at it, and it costs us time, which is potentially downtime as well. Hang on a minute, maybe we should start addressing that, because we could really move the needle on a profitability metric or NPS score improvement metric, those type of things. So if that's something that you think is of value to you, then again, drop Matt or I a line, and we'd be happy to kind of share a way to do that, help you do that exercise for sure. It's good. So what else, Matt? Or do you want to go into some of those layers in a bit more detail? I know we're just doing a quick one today. So.
Yeah. So we won't spend too long. I suppose the key things in pulling out at each of these layers is some very, very clear thing you're trying to achieve. I mean, that goes without saying, but it needs to be very, very clear, because as soon as you start getting complicated and clever with anything from a strategy point of view, then it just doesn't happen. People lose focus. So there definitely needs to be a very clear perspective of what you're trying to achieve, and there needs to be some relation up and down the chain as well, so it adds a bit of glue to understanding like what moves the needle. But the 2 main things, we've already covered one, but the 2 main things at any level of the components, whatever they are, you will ultimately need to have somebody responsible for each of those things. It's got to be some degree of ownership, somebody that's accountable. Depending on the level of that particular item, whether it's a vision all the way through to the initiatives, there needs to be some ownership of there. Somebody that's ultimately going to move the needle for that individual item. And then the other one is to be able to evidence that needle moving, setting some clear targets around the metrics, like what is the target, what number are we at right now for whatever that thing might be. You mentioned around MTTR, it's a great one. It could be asset coverage. It could be one organization I was working with had metrics and initiatives associated to the level of compliance around patching, whatever it might be, some sort of starting position, some sort of target. So you have an owner, you have a clear view of what it is, simple man's language. You've got some owner who's ultimately under the cosh for it, and you've got some metrics, the starting metric, the target metric, and the current progress. That can be manual, you don't need fancy stuff. If you get those in place, you're pretty much set for a good position. And I say this from a position of, I know, 3 of the IT directors I've spoken to just in the last 2 months, 2-3 months, I've got their IT strategies in a PowerPoint presentation, and there's no ability to understand, well, was it successful? Like, we've got these big ideas which are vision territory level, but then there isn't any underlying information to go, well, why should we focus on it? Like, why should we spend the extra money on this initiative, this project, this licenses, whatever else? If you're not creating this linkage, it just becomes a PowerPoint presentation that gathers dust and does nothing. So it's avoiding that kind of territory to make it more of an actionable strategy.
Completely agree with that. And the number of organizations we've seen over the years done that with the move to the cloud, right? They're just like, right, well, we're going to save costs, let's move to the cloud. And they go, yeah, we've completed it, we've successfully moved to the cloud, right? Well, how much cost did you save? And how much did you give back to the bottom line of the company, because it cost you money to do that migration and things. And interestingly, it doesn't end up cheaper most of the time, right? But you do get a different benefit, which is agility, which has a different outcome for the company, which is often really super useful. So yeah. I absolutely love that. I love your accountability piece as well. You know, it's a word that's bandied around a lot, but doesn't often mean too much, I don't think. So being accountable for something that makes a direct impact to a business, and therefore to a person probably on the end of that business, right? You know, your whatever it is, if you're in banking, let's say, and your mum can't get money out of the cash machine to go to a hair appointment or whatever it is, and it takes you an hour to solve that problem, you know, and if you could solve it in 5 minutes, you've made a real difference to your mum's life there. She can still go and have a hair appointment and get money out in a couple of minutes instead of having to cancel it, whatever. That's something you personally do, and it's far easier to be accountable for that stuff that makes a difference. So really understanding, not just at a business level, but at an end user level, the real difference that makes, I think, is huge.
But you know, it's no in like fault of any individual when they first started mapping out their IT or their tooling strategy is like having these layers and the components. If you were using like an enterprise architect tool, you're forced to be able to put this stuff in pretty much. So unless you've used one before and then are doing it manually, you wouldn't really capture things at that level. So I think it's you don't know what you don't know, and I think ultimately having that ownership level is super important, even when it goes beyond just the strategic layer. And then we start talking about the capabilities that the business needs to have, technical and business, the individual tools. All of these layers string together, and all of them have a responsible person that are responsible for each component, as well as some method to measure the success of it as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Right, we have covered a lot here today in our quick, I was going to say quick and dirty, but not been dirty. It's been awesome session today. So we were talking about getting clear on your tools outcomes for 2025. First thing is go clear your head, settle down, give yourself some space to think about this stuff. And then break down your layers into these 6 areas. The first is, what's the business related outcome that you need to make an improvement on? The second is, what's the vision? What are the visions, things that support that business related outcome? Then what is your overall mission statement in your tooling team, in your operations team? And then looking at the overall goals and metrics that you want to achieve, and then breaking that down into objectives and strategies, and then individual initiatives. Having some real accountability and ownership in your team all the way through, stakeholders all the way down, to make sure something happens, and then having real targets and a way to evidence that you are making an impact against those targets, and making a real difference to the end users of your company's product or whatever it is. Maybe it's internal users you look after, making their life better, and being able to measure the impact that you have. And I would be delighted if we walk into some organizations next year who are really, really clear about the difference they are going to make to their customers with tooling. So thank you very much, Matt. Wonderful knowledge as always, super useful. I hope that's been useful for you, audience. If there's anything that you want to know more, get in touch with Matt or myself, and we'll be more than happy to help. If you would like to be a guest on the show next year, or would like a topic covered, please do let one of us know. Otherwise, our next session is on
17th, I think it is.
The 17th of January, where we have the wonderful Richard Simon coming in, who's the CTO at T-Systems, and he will be talking about cloud tooling, getting the most of it, taking cost out, all the usual stuff. But super hot topic, as we know at the moment. So look forward to seeing you all there. Other than that, have a wonderful Christmas, and we look forward to seeing you all in the new year. Take care.
Bye.